Search for this place, and you will be told the same thing every time. Never captured. Every article, every guidebook, every video on the first page of results. And it is a strange thing to say about a building, if you think about it for a second, because somebody had to say it first. That sentence has an author. We know roughly when he wrote it. We know who copied him. We know the architect who repeated it 400 years later without checking. And we can follow it, hand to hand, all the way to the screen you are looking at now. Here is the part that makes it worth an episode. The man who wrote it lived here. He was a monk. He was writing about his own house. So, 4 men, 4 centuries, 1 sentence. And underneath all of it, a real siege, a real garrison, and an abbot who did something so strange that no legend was needed. This is Mont-Saint-Michel. Let's find out who wrote the story. Start with the awkward part. This is not a castle. It is a Benedictine abbey. Benedictine in its bones, though the monks who live in it now are not. Since 2001, the brothers and sisters of the monastic fraternities of Jerusalem have kept the offices here. But look at what is wrapped around it. A ring of walls, gate towers, gun positions, a barbican and 2 cannons standing at the entrance. France's own heritage register does something revealing with all that. It keeps 3 separate records for this rock, 1 for the abbey, 1 for the walls of the town below it, and 1 for the defenses climbing from the seafront to the church door. Read them together and the shape appears. Fortification running without a break from the water's edge to the altar. And in all of that paperwork, the register never once uses the word fortress. For the town walls, it reaches for a different class entirely. The one it keeps for the walls of a settlement. Which is accurate. Those gates are not defending a building. They are defending a street. An oratory went up here in 708. Benedictine monks were installed in 966. The abbey church was begun by the house's own tradition in 1023. And there is an engineering problem built into that. A rock that comes to a point cannot hold up a nave. So the church rests on crypts built out on the slope beneath it, each one carrying a different arm of the building above. Then there is the water. For most of this place's history, the tide was the outer wall. Sand covers the approach at low water. Then the flood comes back across the flats, and because it is crossing flat ground, it arrives fast. Now, the legend says that incoming wave moves at the speed of a galloping horse. The people who run the site put a number on it. About 6 kilometers an hour. Walking pace. Remember that one. It is the first time on this rock that a good story turns out to be bigger than the measurement. And the island? Only above tidal coefficient 110 does the sea close all the way round. The rest of the time, you can walk to it. Fire shaped this building more than any patron did. In 1204, the conventual buildings burned, and the abbey lost the rooms monastic life actually requires. What replaced them is the 3-story range on the north face they call the Merveille, the marvel, raised against the cliff in the early 13th century, built east to west. At the top, a cloister. Below it, the refectory, lit by tall, narrow windows you cannot see from the doorway. Below that, the great vaulted room they call the Knight's Hall. It was going to be bigger. A 3rd range was planned and never built. You can still stand at the exact spot where the money stopped. There is a monumental doorway in the cloister that would have opened into it. It is glazed now. It leads nowhere. And within a few years, the building program had turned somewhere else entirely. To the Châtelet, the twin-towered gate at the abbey entrance. Read that sequence again, because it is the whole story of this place in 2 sentences. An abbey that had been enlarging its monastery, it began enlarging its defenses. By the 15th century, getting into this town meant passing 3 separate works in a row. First the avancée, an outer work with its own gate, a postern onto the sand and the guardhouse of the townsmen. Then the boulevard with its own gate again, a wall walk above, and a curved redan set hard against the rock. And only then the Porte du Roi. Think about what that does to an attacker. You break the first gate, and you are not inside the town. You are standing in a closed yard with armed men above you on 3 sides, looking at another gate. Behind all of it, the great stair climbs to the abbey's own barbican. And the walls those gates are set into, the continuous curtain with its parapet and its machicolations, and the 6 towers along it. Those went up between 1417 and 1420. They were built by the abbot. His name was Robert Jolivet. Normandy was falling to the English, and Jolivet ringed his rock with stone and put 6 towers on it, including the one that still stands over the King's Gate at the southern end. Hold on to his name. Because of everything that happened at Mont-Saint-Michel in the 15th century, the strangest thing by a distance is what Robert Jolivet did next. After 1417, Normandy went to Henry V. Town after town, castle after castle. And this rock did not. In February 1423, the English took the neighbouring islet, Tombelaine, a bare lump of granite out in the same bay, and fortified it. The chronicle says why, in plain words, to hold the people of the Mount in subjection. Then the Mount lost its captain. Jean d'Arcourt was killed at the Battle of Verneuil on the 17th of August, 1424. 4 weeks later, the garrison still had no commander. And on the 12th of September, the English blockade closed around the rock. Now, how many of them were there? Hold this number. A mandate of the Duke of Bedford assigns 130 men-at-arms and a body of archers to that blockade. The scholar who later edited the Chronicle worked it out at 780 fighting men. 1,000 by his own second reckoning, later in the same book. 780. Remember it. Against them, on the rock, a garrison the records never count. And no captain. Jean d'Arcourt was dead, and it would be a full year before Charles VII named Louis de Stouteville to the captaincy. The 2nd of September, 1425. And no abbot, because the abbot was on the other side. In 1420, Robert Jolivet went over to the English. Not quietly and not briefly. He left before the Treaty of Troyes was signed, and he built a career at the top of the Duke of Bedford's administration in France. Behind him, he left the walls he had spent 3 years building, and a community that refused to follow him. The abbey was run in his absence by his vicar general, Jean Gonod. And then Jolivet came back. There is an act, dated the 8th of June, 1425, in which he gives himself 2 titles in the same breath: Abbot of Mont-Saint-Michel, and Commissaire du Roi Notre Sire, Commissioner of the King our Lord, for the recovery of the place of Mont-Saint-Michel. With power, the document says, to raise men-at-arms to hold the siege before it. That May, English companies mustered in front of him on the shore at Ardevon. The abbot of Mont-Saint-Michel inspecting the troops sent to take Mont-Saint-Michel. He knew those walls. He had commissioned them. He knew how thick the curtain was and where the 6 towers stood, because he had put them there. And the garrison held anyway. When Jolivet died at Rouen in 1444, the abbacy passed to Cardinal Guillaume d'Estouteville, the younger brother of Louis d'Estouteville, the captain who had held the place against him. On Monday, the 5th of April, 1434, a great part of the town below burned. 10 weeks later, Lord Scales brought an assault at the walls. The 17th of June, Louis d'Estouteville and his garrison threw him back off the rock. That is the day. That is the whole factual basis of everything you have ever been told about this place. So let's look at how the house wrote it down. The Chronicle of Mont-Saint-Michel says the English came 8,000 strong. The archives never counted them. But 10 years earlier, when the blockade first closed, Bedford's own mandate put the force at 130 men-at-arms and their archers. Hundreds, not thousands. The Chronicle credits the victory to the Archangel and calls the day's events a thing one might call miraculous. And the Chronicle says that Lord Scales died there, at the walls. As it was said, the monk adds, he knew it was hearsay. He wrote it down anyway and left it standing for 500 years. He did not. The editor found him in the archives and corrected it in 4 words, wounded but not killed. And you can go further than that because Scales kept leaving a paper trail. He issued acts under his own name in 1436, and again in 1441. He died in London in July 1460, pulled out of a boat and murdered by watermen in a different war on the wrong side of it. Now hold those two dates next to each other. The chronicle was still being compiled until about 1468, which means the monks of this abbey were still writing their book, while the man they had killed in it was alive, at liberty, and signing documents. So, never captured. Here is the chain, and every link in it has a date. Link 1. The chronicle, written in this house about this house, sometime between about 1434 and 1468, of the Archangel.
Who has always kept and keeps this place, Maman?
That is not a military claim. It is a devotional one. A monk saying his patron saint looks after his monastery. Link 2, and this is where it stops being a monastery's private opinion. The 1st of August, 1469, 1 year after the monks put their chronicle down. At Amboise, Louis XI signs the letters patent founding a new order of chivalry and names it for the Archangel. In the opening lines, giving his reasons, he writes this:
And who has always surely kept, preserved, and defended his place and oratory called Mont-Saint-Michel, without its being subjugated or put into the hands of the ancient enemies of our kingdom.
45 years after an English army sat in that bay, the house's formula is now in a royal charter. Link 3. The 17th century. Dom Jean Hunes, the abbey's own historian, is telling a story about a royal pilgrimage, and drops it in brackets, as something everyone already knows.
Which by a special prerogative of heaven was never under the power of the enemies of France.
Note where that sits. Not in an argument, in a parenthesis. It has stopped being a claim and become an assumption. And elsewhere in the same book, there is a chapter titled that this abbey is impregnable, which gives in its first paragraph the exception.
That no one could ever make himself master of it, except by famine or treachery.
Except by treachery. The man writing the impregnability chapter knew the way in. And 200 years before he wrote it, the treachery had already happened, and it had walked out of the front gate wearing the abbot's ring. Link 4, 1877. Édouard Corroyer, the architect the state has just put in charge of restoring this building. On page 57 of his description, he reprints Wiens's line word for word. And then, later in the same book, he finishes the job. He is writing about fires. The town's houses crowded so close they kept setting the abbey alight. And on his way through that sentence, he drops in a clause.
And although it had never been taken.
That is the whole mechanism, in one subordinate clause. He is not arguing it. He is not citing it. He is walking past it. Link 5 is your search results. And the people who run the Mount today are far more careful than the internet is. They say it was an impregnable stronghold during the 100 Years' War, and that its ramparts withstood all the attacks by the English. Bounded in time, bounded in enemy. Both the blockade and the assault were real. The garrison held. Those are the claims the records will carry. And honestly, they are enough. Now the part the postcards leave out. Popular accounts will tell you the revolution turned the abbey into a prison. The abbey's own history says otherwise, and the correction is more interesting than the mistake. Prisoners were arriving here by lettre de cachet, while the monks were still in residence. Under the Ancien Régime, under the Congregation of Saint-Maur. The monks ran a monastery that was also a place of detention. The abbey picked up a nickname it still records, the Bastille of the Seas. What the revolution changed was scale. The state took the property of the clergy, the monks were expelled, and this became a long-sentence state prison. The labels do not carry it. The numbers do. 18 prisoners in 1776. Around 300 priests held here in 1793. More than 700 people by 1818. Housing that many inside a monastery meant rebuilding it from the inside out. Cells were fitted into the vaulted halls of the Merveille. Wooden floors were dropped in to cut the tall rooms in half. And there were looms in the refectory because the prison ran workshops. And then the hard turn. Look at what happened to other French abbeys after the Revolution. Sold, quarried, gone. This one is standing. The prison saved the building. The prison was closed by decree in 1863, and what the state got back was a wreck. An architect named Corroyer was put in charge of it on the 14th of May, 1872. Yes, the same Corroyer, 5 years before he wrote the sentence. Everything you photograph here was shaped by what came next. That spire, the one on every postcard, the one that makes the silhouette a silhouette, was put up in 1897. And the gilded St. Michael standing on top of it is Fremier's from the same moment. So the single most recognizable thing about this profile is also the newest thing on it. It keeps going. Remember that doorway in the cloister? The one cut for a chapter house nobody ever built. The bays beside it, the ones that open west toward the sea and end up in every photograph of this place, were walled up for centuries. The view you queue to take is a 19th century restorer's decision. Even the great treadwheel down in the old ossuary, the wheel prisoners walked inside to haul supplies up the north face, dates from 1818, and it is itself a replica of the machines it replaced. None of that is a scandal. Restoration is how a building this old stays standing. But the shape you came here to photograph is younger than the story you were told about it. So, never captured. What actually happened is smaller and better. A blockade, an assault, and a garrison, the records never count that threw it back. From behind a wall built for them by an abbot, who was by then standing on the beach with the other side. The rest, the 8,000, the archangel on the ramparts, the enemy lord dead at the foot of the wall, who went home and lived another 26 years. The rest is a house writing about itself, and 4 centuries of people repeating it without opening the book. The book is still there, with the archives in its own footnotes, correcting the story on the page that tells it. You can look it up. That is all anybody had to do. This has been Stonekeep Atlas. The full record behind this episode, every date, every source, the complete written guide, is linked at the top of the description. If you go yourself, book the Abbey ticket before you travel and check the tide table the same day you check the train. The shuttle is the only way across for most of the year, and the queue is longest between 11 and 3. Go up to the Abbey first before the Grande Rue fills. The street is the last thing worth seeing, not the first. And stand on the west terrace at the top of the tide when the water closes round the rock. That is the outer wall this whole story was built on. And if you want the opposite case, a rock that kept getting taken, go and look at Edinburgh Castle next. 26 sieges in 11 centuries, the most besieged place in Britain, and we have already made that episode. And if castles with stories like this one are your kind of history, subscribe. The Stonekeep Atlas archive already holds 100 of them, from the Rhine to the Loire, with more episodes on the way.